I'm Julian. This is the Boldly Ambivalent podcast. I usually forget to tell people that. And I have different subjects and focuses depending on what I'm interested in. But at the moment, well, they're always focused on improving me. Sometimes people will in a podcast or be more focused on telling people what they should do or how they should think or something. I'm focused, I just want to have conversations where I come to understand people better. And hopefully that'll improve me and it'll improve anyone who's listening. Um, I chose you. I don't know a lot about you, but I chose you because I heard you talking to one of my previous podcast guests, Artemis, and I also followed you on Twitter a bit, and you've made some references to farming, and I really don't know a lot about it. I got the impression it was a more low tech, organic type farming. I really don't know. Um, and that's something that I've dabbled in and been interested in for a lot of my life. I have family members who've been interested in it. I'm currently working part time at a farm that's organic. And so, anyone, it sounded like it was working pretty well for you. You made some reference to someone was talking about good investments, and you were talking about some kind of tunnel or something that you thought if you would be a good investment. And I just thought, okay, well, if you got the numbers and so on worked out, this is someone I want to talk to. So yeah, and then it sounded like you're working all the time too. So all this fit together to sound like someone that would be interesting and good for me to talk to. Who are you, or what do you want us to think? How did you want us to think of you on the internet, and how would you describe what you do?
Oh, as far as the internet is concerned, I mostly just argue with people on Twitter.
No, no, sorry, no. I mean, I don't know whether you want to go by a nickname or your full
Oh,
name and give everyone your address, or like what. Just how do you want to refer to yourself? Yeah.
well, my name is Gar Lock.
Okay.
Uh,
Okay. Like I just tell people Julian, and then my channel's boldly ambivalent, and I don't give a last name. So that's how I do it.
yeah, well, my name is Gar Lock, and I live in a small world in real life. So, like, the people that know me will know me, and the people that won't. Uh, and yeah, I don't, I don't envisage ever being important enough for people
To care.
or controversial enough for people to be interested in who I am.
Right. Yeah. That's the goal. I'm at this point. I'm so paranoid that I never know. Anyways, how would you describe what you do? Because as I say, like I've told you what I know. It's really not very much. Um,
Well, I have a small farm where I grow. I grow about 128 products, I think, at the moment. But like that's built up to over a long time. And it eats vegetables and flowers and herbs and fruit. And then I also have I do forestry maintenance and rangering, so looking after um, uh, the natural woodlands here that end up on people's private land, and sometimes there's a crossover and stuff like that. And we always have an argument over who is responsible, the landowner or the council that want the job done and stuff like that. And I kind of try to be in the middle a little bit and just get stuff done. And then I have another part of the business where I cut trees down using only hand tools for specific things. It's mostly houses where somebody can take a photograph of themselves with the tree. I'll send them the video of the tree being cut and processed using only hand tools. And then the lovely beam they're paying a fortune for that goes over their doorway actually has a verifiable story that includes them in its processing, and we make it in such a way that it should last hundreds of years, um but that's about selling a story, and my interest in it is I plant 50 trees for every one that I cut down. And so I spend time with other people that have farmland and stuff here, and there's a national project in trying to replant trees to the right mix that we should have here, uh, and remove foreign trees from different climates and stuff.
right.
Uh,
So would you say is the farming, is it following a similar path? Because I've heard the term regenerative farming come up.
yeah.
So what kind of like what? as I say, I have the impression it's more of a low tech organic type thing. But I just saw a tweet maybe from earlier today or something where you made some reference to it being organic. But how would you describe the? I don't know. Maybe there's no point in trying to describe the actual approach that you use, or like method, the
So
school of thought.
regenerative agriculture is where your focus is on the soil, and so you and the long term health of the soil. So you don't use petrochemical fertilizers or anything to boost a crop, because there's a cost to pay for that in the longevity of the soil itself. And the principle behind it is the soil and the subsoil, the clay underneath it, where I am, is different in different places, but the ground actually has everything that a plant needs. What it's missing is the life that provides the network of exchange of nutrients to the different plants. So one of the oldest plots I've got, I have never dug the soil over in 12 years now. I've only ever put compost and manures and ferments and teas that I make out of other plants on top. And then underneath, then it's had enough time for the life cycle, the ecosystem of the soil to develop itself, and it needs very little. I can grow absolutely anything in it. All of the restrictions to do with pH and soil type and all of that no longer apply. And it needs very little. So like if I have a crop of garlic on at the moment, and it would traditionally need a good nitrogen fertilizer when you put it in initially. But I would plant it in, and once it starts to show, I'll cut and shred maybe like a third of an acre of nettles, stinging nettles.
Yep, yep.
And then I'll just put that on, just dust it around instead. And then at this time of the year, it needs, it's coming into harvest time. And ordinarily you would feed it with potash, which is very high, a high potassium feed. But we can get that through burnt wood ashes, right? So anybody using a wood fire around here, and I have a wood fire pit myself, we save those ashes to apply at the right time instead. But it's always on top, and we let the soil and the organisms in the soil sort it out. And so the result is every year I'm gaining maybe 5 centimeters, about 2 inches of topsoil, because I'm getting a little blend underneath where the topsoil meets the clay or the subsoil layer. It's getting the top layer is getting deeper every year, and I'm adding to the top of it. And I did a mycelium test there about 3 years ago, and I have a mycelium fungal network under the farm, which is they were able to test it to make sure it's the same person. I don't know what you call it, same creature, same fungus, right? And it was 2,000 meters apart, and it was the same individual.
Huh.
Right. And there would be, I don't know the actual numbers to say it, but in every handful of soil, there will be miles of mycelium network, which is it's a fungus.
Right.
And part of that is being connected to the forest with high quality untouched soil, because the mycelium really lives under trees and under the forest. That's where it wants to be. Mm-hmm. And then it's connected under the farm. And so I don't do it because it's too important to actually pull a crop off and make money. But technically speaking, I should be able to just pour all of those nettles into a pile somewhere, and the mycelium will distribute it throughout the field. And it will exchange nutrients that are needed for carbohydrates, because it has no way to convert sunlight into carbohydrates, which is what the plants can do.
I'm assuming, though, it's a lot faster for you to do it, transport it, than it is for the mycelium. Like I'm assuming it probably doesn't, we can't move it in a day or something, but I really don't know.
Like, I don't know. I'm not involved in any of the research or the science behind it.
Yeah, no, I've only heard a few things recently actually about just how peculiar and interesting it is, and I'd like to learn more. So it's interesting that you mentioned it. Um, Before we go further, I'm just curious. I always like to ask people about accents, and I'm curious to know what my accent sounds like to you. Like what certain accents people will say, like they'll say English sounds classy. It sounds, whatever they say. French sounds. What what is there any sort of character or of mine? It's an interesting perspective that I wouldn't normally get on myself, and so I'm curious to know.
Like, you sound generically American to me.
Okay, no, I've heard that too. My mother traveled a lot when she was younger, and she said that people will call Canadians American.
Uh,
It doesn't.
Whatever the difference is, like,
Yeah. I don't know the difference. Like a lot of Americans sound the same. Like, to me, they just sound like they're talking. So
you have there is very strong accents where they have certain vowel combinations that they have a unique expression for, and you're not kind of expressing any of that to me. So, like, I mean, I'd hear a New York accent.
right.
I might struggle between, say, the difference between Tennessee and Alabama,
Uh-huh.
but I'd know that it's that area.
Right. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But then my own accent is all mixed up. So, like, like, my mother is Persian and my father is Irish, and I grew up in England till I was a teenager and then moved to Ireland. So, like, how I sound to other people, I have no idea. I don't really care, but you know, I just speak. I don't think about it. I just speak.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess I don't. I'm starting to think I don't have a very good ear for accents. I've talked to people where they hear me as having an accent, but I don't hear them as having an accent, which is interesting. And I am
But
so
no,
that.
like, in Ireland, the accents between we've got 32 counties, and the accents between the counties are very distinct, and you would know exactly where they're from. And if you were tuned in and had some experience, you'd know whether it was the countryside or the town or the city regions of the county that they're in. And so I know that my English accent it's there, but it's dulled enough that to the Irish, they're not 100% sure, even that I'm English, uh, and then, but the English hear the Irish and know it immediately, but it sounds generically Irish to them.
Yeah, I mean, now that you're talking about it, I had heard you before. I just thought Irish, but now that you're listening, there are words that don't sound like they have much of what to me I think of as an Irish accent. So those are probably the more Englishy words. Um, so yeah, that's. Anyways, I just like to ask that. It's kind of an interesting perspective thing. And when I get to talk to people of different parts of the world, why not ask them?
But
Um,
I have also, I'm just on the point of accents as well. There's another fella, I find him very annoying, Tate. I forget the rest of it. He's another character that flows in his accent in and out of different accents, and I've heard the different accents before, so I can pick out at least three. But like, I have always seen it as something that if I focus on it, or I think, like, if I'm around other people of a strong accent long enough, I'll adopt their accent. And I don't know that I'm doing it. It just happens. And I don't even hear it in myself.
mhm.
And there's a region of Ireland where they roll their R's. And I have lived with a group of guys for about a month doing a contract, and they were all from that area. And I ended up rolling my R's by the end of the month. My accent doesn't hold. It's quite flexible.
Hmm.
Uh,
I
and
wonder
then
if I wonder if because they're Canada's relatively large and maybe there I know there are accents in it, but maybe because maybe there are bigger blocks. So maybe I'm just justifying my own insensitivity, but maybe we're not as used to hearing accents.
I find it an interesting fascination you have, because um, I mean, you talk about self-improvement. It'd be a self-improvement to get over it and forget it, you know. Because you have no control over it. So even though, like, you might be okay, you might sound Canadian or you might sound high North American to me, or like roughly from over there to me. Right. Exactly what that means to me and what associations I put with that when I hear it, right, are entirely related to my own life and all the other people that I've met and the different things I've seen and heard. And you can't possibly know how I perceive a Canadian accent when I hear it, even if I identify it.
Well,
And so,
that's why I was interested to ask you. I'm just curious to know other people's perspectives. That's all. It's just a neat because it can seem like such a personal thing to hear someone. Oh, they sound this way and they sound that. So I'm just interested to know how I sound to other people. It's nothing deeper than that. It's just
right,
because
okay.
my show's about perspectives and understanding people. I like to flip it around and see how I look or sound to them. That's all. I promise.
Mm,
Anyways, if we could move on, one thing before we go any further with the farm stuff is what kind of a climate do you have? Like, what's it? What are the extremes? I really don't know.
um, very mild. So we don't get much below freezing, and we rarely go over 30, which would be 90s for you.
It's all, I'm actually I think in centigrade, so that's just
Yeah.
fine.
So we rarely like, and if it happens, it's for a few days, you know. And it rains a lot. But then I'm in a very wet side of the country. The other side of the country gets half the rainfall, you know.
Wow.
So yeah, I mean, things like clay heat batteries work great here because the temperature fluctuation isn't a lot, you know. So when you're setting up a polytunnel, if you're setting it up on land that's quite heavy in clay, if you dig out channels like flat topped pyramids and you would walk across the top and then fill the troughs with your topsoil and compost and what you're going to be growing medium, then these little pyramids, which are actually underground, will heat up during the summer and cool down in the winter. And it takes a year or two to really activate. But once it does, it keeps your tunnel warm in the winter and cool in the summer. And that works really well in climates where there's not a huge fluctuation in temperature, you know. I do believe that if you're like in Canada, you're probably what, 50, 55, 58 degrees north,
I I don't know.
something like that. So you've got the light cycle for it. And so you've got a really heavy seasonally light cycle. You don't have much light in the winter and you have loads of light in the summer,
Right.
I would assume.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, well, we get like let me think about this for a second. Like 16 hours of light at the brightest part of the year. Like 5 a.m. it's starting to get light, and 9 p.m. it's beginning to be dark.
And
Um,
that's the brightest.
that's the brightest.
Okay, you're actually further south than me then. I
Yeah,
didn't think you would be,
I'm in
but
the bottom of Canada.
okay.
Like I'm in the lowest point, pretty much. There are parts of the states that are higher. So
All right, okay. Yeah.
yeah.
So do you get hot summers and
Yeah, oh
cold
yeah. I
winters?
mean, hot by my standards. So, like, the highest would be, I would think, the highest where I am specifically. Like I've heard it gets hotter elsewhere would be 30, around 30 degrees, 32 degrees Celsius, and then the humidity makes it worse. Um, which to me is like all I want to do is go to the beach when it's like that. That's about it. And then the winters, again, where I am, that would probably be the coldest. Would be minus 30 degrees centigrade. Um, and and that's pretty cold. I find. I'm just even that'd be pretty rare. It'd be more like minus 24.
So can I ask, just to focus the conversation a little bit, what are you thinking about like natural farming in terms of like, so are you thinking maybe it's something you'd like to do, open your own farm? I mean, working on someone else's farm is great, but it's rubbish money. You
Yeah,
know, you do it for the health. and the experience. You definitely don't do it for the money, you know.
Um, right. Well, it is something. As I say, I've done it on and off. There's a property my family owns, so I've done some there. It's always been a family interest, um, but never really seriously pursued. And one of the things is to do it so that it makes any kind of money at all is a major commitment. Like you've got to have a plan, and that's what you're doing, I think.
Hmm.
And even then, it I know people who are barely scraping by. Um, so really, there's my interest in terms of talking to you is I think it's I not that I've done a thorough search of YouTube, but I think it's interesting. I haven't seen any podcasts that where people just talk about it. I'm interested in your experience as someone who's doing sustainable farming. So I'm interested in some of the details, but I'm also just interested in the general experience in terms of how much time do you put in? What is it about it that appeals to you? What's the worst about it? What's the best about it? What um do you think you have to be a certain kind of person to put up with it, or do you think it would be good for everyone? What's beneficial, helpful personally to you about doing it? And some of the details, like how do you? Well, I've got some questions here. Like any in order for it to be worth doing financially, are there certain requirements you've learned? Um, like for example, here something I've noticed is that people that do better tend to, first of all, they cannot compete with grocery stores, so they have to be selling it to people who care where it came from. Often they make more money from selling more luxurious items, including things like flowers, which is fine. Um, finding buyers can be difficult. Sometimes you can find restaurants and things. So I'm interested to know the sorts of buyers you find. Is it individuals? Is it businesses? Um, yeah, I'm just sort of like a combination of a practical sense. I want people, including me, just to have a sense of what day to day your a farming life is like, and also some of the details that I mentioned.
So yeah, I did mention I work 95 hours a week, but you don't have to, you know. I
Yeah.
mean, I've got loads of things going on and I just love it and I don't see it as work. And like yourself, every moment of my day is about trying to improve myself and see what I can see how good I can be, see what I can really make of myself. You know. As a personal challenge, like how much better can I be as an individual, like and then like I have a family, so everything I do has to be in line with having a family. And then I want to work outside, right? That was actually really the only thing that I say that I personally wanted out of it. I didn't want to be inside when I worked. And so what my main rival in one end of the business for the vegetables going into residential and business to business, uh, uh, her primary goal is to feed people with proper clean food. You know, that's kind of her. Everything is geared towards that for her, right? Uh, for me, I'm not quite bound by that, you know. And when I started learning about the different ways to do things, I didn't have a tractor and I didn't have any money. I was no choice but to use hand tools when I started, and I fell in love with the idea of like growing the soil as opposed to growing the food. Uh, and when I started learning about it and realizing how far away conventional agriculture is from what we should be doing if we care about whether there's any soil left, you know, the longevity project, right? And then started to realize that there was huge advantages to doing things on a small scale by hand. Price, you know, like when you're doing things on field scale by a tractor, you need to run the tractor. I mean, it's an incredibly expensive machine to own and run, or to rent, or to contract someone to do the job. Um, whereas, like you could, if you're able to do a tenth of the amount by hand, it's the same amount of profit. You know?
Right.
And I mean, I love being out there in the rain digging holes with the crowbar because like I feel like I'm washing away the pain. It's a spiritual experience for me. And so but you don't you don't have to do that, you know. There's some really good like free information and cheap books that I could recommend to you that will explain how to do it on a small scale when you're selling directly either to a person at a farmer's market or a box scheme, or you're selling direct to a chef and there's nobody taking any money out of the pot. You're not dealing with the distributor or, you know. So I suppose an easy example here, potatoes are a big thing, and that's what I started out in, was growing carrots and potatoes because that's what people eat the most of. And thought that that would make it easy to sell. And the problem was it was hard to make money out of the hours required to dig it out with a fork and process it. And so, as you said, I was pushed down the line of looking for people that valued the fact that I wasn't spraying anything on the crop and that I wasn't using a tractor. But I don't need to sell as many potatoes to make the same amount of money. I mean, the amount of money that they spend to do large-scale agriculture is absolutely off the chart, and their profit margin is tiny. You know? Right. So I suppose it's better, like, because all I wanted to do was grow outside rather than I wanted to be a famous potato grower, or I took over a farm that somebody else was already doing. I went and found out what people wanted, you know. So I went and I found that there was like a chef's network where they all know each other and they all collaborate together and they all talk to each other. And I just invited myself and showed up and said, I want to grow some food. What is it you're looking for that you would like local, that doesn't travel well, whatever? And then I went with what they were saying. And then I priced myself quite high. So I got all the pricing from the main distributors that were selling to restaurants and hotels. And you've got the cheap stuff, which is mass produced in Spain here for us. And it's known to lack flavor, but it's cost effective. And you've got a type of chef whose job it is to turn rubbish food into something tasty at a profitable rate, right? Then you've got other chefs that don't really have a budget because their customers don't really have a budget. Right? And what they want is something nobody else has. So I then kind of converted towards trying to stay on trend, right? So I do the mushrooms that are in fashion, if I can get them, if I can get the spawn. I do like black tomatoes, and then I offer them to my chefs, one like that I now know, one at a time, and offer them exclusivity on it. Right, so they know nobody else in this county has got it. And then in the last couple of years, so that's one way to approach being in niche business. So like the how to make money out of it stuff is all it's marketing and branding, and it's listening to the people that are buying. And if you want to do it small scale, you have to find the people that have the money, that are willing to spend it on you, so that you can do what you're doing. You know? And there isn't really it's very hard to do a medium size farm, you know. I mean, when somebody tells me they've got 20 acres and they employ 10 people, I was like, it's too big, and it's not big enough, and it's not small enough, you know. Right. It's so hard. That's a really hard place to be. Like.
Right. So what size is yours?
I grow the vegetables on 2 acres. Yeah, I have a lot more than that, but that's what I'm growing that side of it on. So I don't deal with the residential market anymore. I kind of passed that off to a competitor and said, I won't touch that. You're doing that really well. I won't compete against you on that. However, the hotels and the restaurants, it's gloves off. I'm going for them. Sorry. And we have a great relationship. We go and help each other with stuff and whatever. And so I honed in on that market. And part of the reason is, right, I can grow carrots, right, and I can grow big carrots that taste good and provide excellent value, right, and I'll get about €3 a kilo, and that to me works out at about €150 a square meter a year, with about 5 minutes of work per square meter, right? And that's how I would calculate it. But then I can grow these diddy little carrots that are a specialist carrot that have no core. And when you want to roast one, the top of it, the center part of the leaf, if you put like a little ceramic hood on it, it'll just dry. And the reason is it's got an awful lot of cellulose in the top. And this allows the chefs to kind of create a caramelized carrot, and they'll put one on with a lovely, stiff, crispy, sweet top. Right? But somebody in France did that. Everybody else tried to copy it. Nobody could copy it. It turned out that it was a very specific carrot he was using. So I didn't go on a hunt. I read what it was. I didn't go on a secret mission to find it. It was the information was there. So I grew that carrot, and it's more fussy. So I failed my first time growing it, right? And but once I got it right, I mean, I have to vet them because they have to be the right size. So an awful lot of it gets thrown away. But I get 750 a square meter per year for that. Because they will pay €26 a kilo for that carrot. And they're only putting one on a plate, and they're treating it like it's precious.
Okay. Something I need to mention. Zoom has changed something in how it operates since I last used it.
Okay.
So it looks like I have a 40-minute limit. So in a few minutes, I'm going to have to end this and then start a new conversation.
Okay.
I don't know. I used to do that when there was more than 2 people, and now I use the free version, and now apparently that limit is on for even just 2 of us. I'm just checking to see if there's a count. There's nothing. I got a few more minutes. Something interesting that occurred to me is when you're talking about how you wanted to work outside and how you don't mind if it's raining because there's a therapeutic element to it. I thought this sounds like an interesting twist on the saying "follow your bliss," because in a way you're focusing on what you put into it rather than on what you get out of it. But what you want to put into it is work. So it's not like
Yes.
saying do whatever is easy and appeals to you. It's you're doing something which is harder and appeals to you,
Yes.
which is kind of interesting to me. Now, how hot does it get again? Like, what's the most unpleasant weather that you get? Do you have any bugs that suck your blood? Like we have mosquitoes and black flies here.
We've got tiny little mosquito type things that don't carry diseases and leave you with little pimples, and they're really annoying.
Okay.
And when I'm, they don't come out during the day. They come out in the evening once it cools.
Right.
And they're vicious because they've been asleep all day and now they're hungry, right? And we call them midges, right? Whatever the name of them are, but they're much smaller than a mosquito and they're really irritating. And I put diesel on the back of my neck, a little few drops of diesel, and that keeps them off my head anyway.
So otherwise, you just kind of don't work too much that time and suffer when you do. Like, is that
pretty much? Yeah, I just deal with it. Yeah. The midges are out. The diesel keeps them off my head. It's the face that's the most annoying.
Yeah.
And the head.
Yeah.
You
No,
can put up with it on the arms. We've got ticks that carry a disease, so you have to be very careful in long grass. They pick up a disease that's just like a head cold for a deer, but it can pass to humans through the tick, and there's no cure for it. It makes an awful mess of people. It's something they end up dealing with for the rest of their life. Yeah.
Right. There's some concern about that here now. Is that Lyme's disease?
That's the one. Yeah.
Yeah, they've started to move in. I just in the last 5 or so years we start to see them here.
Oh, that's a dirty one. I know a guy who's suffered heavily with it for 15 years, and there's no end in sight. It's not getting any better, and there's nothing any bit. Nobody has come up with an answer for how to treat it. So they can lessen the symptoms one at a time, but the whole thing can't. It's horrible.
Right. Okay, I'm gonna start a new segment here just because I'm just
Okay.
about out of time here. Okay, so stay put. I'll send you a link in a second. Works.
If I can just wrap up what I was saying about the making money out of the farm business, right? It's very much you have to be super honest with yourself about what you know and what you don't know, and drop all your assumptions and find out what people want, and go and speak to people. That's the hardest bit. Marching into places and trying to get a hold of people and being told, go away, it's busy, or you get the whole range of possible responses, and it was a learning experience in getting over my own ego. Trying to do it originally, and still to this day, I get told. Even yesterday, I got told some of my product wasn't good enough. And
are you able, like you say you do a bunch of things, so how much do you think you can make a living just on farming?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, and when I say a living, like I don't mean a lavish living. Like my feeling is if you're doing this, you're probably not expecting. I wouldn't expect anyone to want to be looking to make tons of money. One thing, you've already got your own food, a lot of it, so
yeah. And this is it. It depends. So, like, if you have a type of farming you want to do. So Jean-Martin Fortier is a French Canadian fella who wrote a book called The Market Gardener.
Right.
He came up with a high intensity, almost regenerative style of farming. Connor Crickmore in Neversink farm. Where is he? I don't know. He's somewhere cold in it, over in your side of the planet, and he does something very similar, but he's more business minded in his approach, and he's invented a lot of tools, time-saving tools.
Oh, is this Elliot Coleman? Is he? No, he's American. No.
Elliot Coleman, you would say, is the generation before these guys.
Okay, yeah.
Right. These are guys that have operating farms right now. They're a good 10, 20 years into their project, and they've worked a lot of stuff out. And in the social media for organic regenerative stuff, these are some of the leaders showing people how to do it. You should watch it back and pick up the names. Neversink Farm, Jean-Martin Fortier, Richard Perkins, he's in Sweden. There's Curtis Stone, but he's gone a little bit political. I don't know how much farming stuff he does anymore, but his old videos on he was making money out of back gardens. He was renting his neighbors' back gardens and doing very high intensity growing. Mm-hmm. And his speciality was really fast cropping items that he could do multiple times a year. So when he was growing turnips, he was growing like the 60-day white turnips, and he was trying to get 3 rounds a year in. Mm-hmm. So these people have the growing side of how do you get maximum product per square meter. The other side is how do you get maximum moolah for what you're growing. And that is all about, you've got to have big balls, and you've got to value your product, and you've got to understand how your customer sees you. So I have customers that don't really care what product they're buying off me, because all they want to do is use the affiliate branding. So they want to have in there, and that branding isn't really even for their customers. It's for this ESG score.
Oh.
You know? And so they've got environmental officers or green officers that they're all hiring now that are documenting what the companies are doing about being on towards the environment. And so just on principle alone, I have always never used plastic or anything like that, and always tried to take back my packaging and use reusable packaging if I can, wooden boxes and things.
Right.
And I'd make the wooden boxes. I'd get a load of students down for a workshop and we'd all make 50 boxes for the day or whatever. I'm probably the only delivery man that gets invited to walk through the restaurant with my product into the kitchen, as opposed to through the delivery door.
Right.
And that, like, they will call me and ask me to deliver at 8:00 in the evening.
Right.
And the chef will come out of the kitchen. Oh, thank you for coming in on such short notice. And it's the same order he gets every week, you know. It's so great to have a local farmer that will look after everybody, you know. And this is all a show. And so then it made me realize that in some businesses, it's the imagery of it rather than the product itself. Now, the product still has to be good enough to be on the plate. There's a minimum standard, but I'm no longer selling the maximum standard. And so then I feel more comfortable putting my prices up, you know, because it then the kohlrabi or the lettuce or whatever doesn't have to be of value. I just can't push their weekly bill over what is acceptable to them. And then this becomes a negotiation of trying to guess where that level might be, because they obviously want to get that for as cheap as they can get it, you know. And so I offer a service of taking away, I tried to work on taking away raw food, but the kitchens just can't operate with separating food like that. So I went for the coffee waste, the waste coffee, grinds, everybody's got their own name for it, from the coffee machines. And in the 5-star places, it's the loose leaf teas as well. And I will recycle them, right? And so I'll get my wife to come along with her phone, take a video of it. I'll be there with the general manager, and I'll be in my dungarees and my straw hat, and look how good this hotel is, you know.
So when you do that and you recycle that, does that mean that you also you can only take things that are themselves organic? Am I right? Like you wouldn't.
Okay, so I have to know the chemical composition, and I have to know how to compost it, and I have to produce a report to say that I'm handling it properly.
Okay.
Yeah. So the organic certification people will always be only ever interested in, do I know the hazards and how am I dealing with it? Right. And when you're applying to become organic, they want to know that you know what problems have you got and how are you going to solve them without using petrochemicals. Right. So I live in an area with loads of deer. Right. So I can't handle that with any poison or whatever. And so they want to know how am I handling the problem, right? And so when I say that I'm growing garlic, they say you're going to need a lot of nitrogen source for growing garlic. And then in the second half of the year, you're going to need a lot of potassium. Where are you sourcing that? You know? And so once you answer all of these questions and they understand that you know what you're doing and that you are actually operating organically, that's it. You know, they'll come around and they'll have a look, and once every couple of years I'll be selected for a bit of a soil test. But you know, once you know what you're doing and they see that you're doing it, they leave you. You know?
So what I'm trying to understand is if you're collecting, say, a hotel's coffee leftovers to compost, Are you concerned that it's organic, or do you have ways of processing it to your satisfaction that it'll won't contaminate your farm in any way?
Yes. Well, for a start, it's already in the making of the coffee. It's been sterilized.
Right. So any of the bad stuff went to the people, and it's not in the
Right.
grounds anymore.
And there can't be anything in the coffee that humans can't consume.
Mm-hmm.
The acidity of the coffee is more of a problem for me than any potential um, chemicals. I'm more concerned about the manure that I receive than I am.
Right, right. I
Uh,
ask because this has been a concern of mine. Like on occasion, uh, myself or my dad have tried to collect garbage from some place or manure, and I'm not presenting myself as a perfectly organic farmer to anyone, but when I have wanted it to be as good as possible, or if I was looking for something to feed my chickens, and so that was a concern. Is yeah, maybe I can get some free vegetable scraps from a grocery store or something, but what's on them, and am I going to worry about that or not? Um, but yeah, I'm hoping this will be interesting to other people. I find all the details of the business side of it and everything you're talking about quite interesting, actually. Um, and I had another question, and it has escaped me. Um, oh, I know what it was. As far as so when you're selling to people who are going for the image partly, how do you feel about that? Does it how does it seem like it jars with some of the principles of farming from your point of view, or is it what? No.
um, I'm happy good food is going on the plate. I'm very, very, very proud of my product. That's why I said when a chef told me that my stuff wasn't good enough, like that hurts, and I spend the rest of the week trying to make sure that I'm not acting out because I've been hurt, you know. And I try to make sure I channel that into he was complaining about my radish. Like I by within a day, I was determined to bring him in the best fucking radish anyone's ever seen, and I taste that motherfucker. I turn it into a challenge. Is how I deal with
Yeah.
it.
Did it work? Did you win him over with your radishes?
Oh, it only happened yesterday. Yeah. So I'm still working on it.
We'll see. Okay, okay.
I have to work out what was wrong with it. I've been eating radishes all day, trying to and then realizing I don't really know a lot about how a radish should taste.
I was going to say, like, I'll eat a radish, especially if it's cooked, but I've never been a fan of radishes. I really wouldn't be the one to judge.
And then I'm playing demons in my head. Is he just fucking with me, trying to get a discount, or am I? Because he still took them, you know. And I'm like, I don't want you to be uncomfortable taking stuff. I don't need charity, you know. Like, if you're not happy, tell me explicitly what you're not happy about, and let me fix the problem, you know.
Right.
Um, and I obviously won't charge you for if you're not happy, like, because I'm charging you a lot anyway.
Yeah. Yeah.
And uh, like, it to me, it's a personal battle. Like, I'm more interested in me getting over being told I wasn't good enough today.
Hmm.
Right, that it's of more of a focus to me than the radishes, you know. But I've already been on the phone to my rival Mary and asked saying to her, like, have you ever got kickback off him before? You know, and she's never dealt with him. And I was like, how do you, when you're growing your radish, have you got any specific requirements? Because he's after telling me my radish is shit, and she's laughing at me. Nothing came of the conversation really that I can work with. But that's part of the business. And I think that if you don't care enough, if that doesn't hurt you to be told that your stuff's not good enough, then you've got an ego defense that will get in the way of you getting better. You know, that yeah. However, you are managing your own ego then is almost in the realm of denial. I mean, my man is really good. He charges a fortune to eat in his restaurant. He's not famous, but like locally, he's one of the best. And uh, he's the man that if he says my stuff is good, that carries weight. And so when he says bad, it hurts, you know. And that's a big part of the business too, Exactly. But I would always, from a business point of view, and trying to make it work and have a life around it. To me, I built it in so like that my family can be part of it, and so my kids are on the farm all the time. So like I'm not this like absentee father that's out on a mission to um uh, be the richest person in the world or whatever. You know, I just get up in the morning and I can't stop thinking about every aspect of my business and what's going
So that
on.
that leads me to a question, which is, if it seems to me that learning or planning when you're first starting out is a big thing, because it's, you can ease into this, I guess, if you just start out with sort of a hobby and then you keep growing it and growing it. But certainly based on observing this farmer I work for, like there's a lot of planning in terms of whether it's rotation, or I'll have this crop in this location for so long and then it'll be done and then I can replace it with another one. And I don't know, it just seems to me like there potentially is a fair bit of planning. Would you say that is that a hurdle getting into it, or what, how did you start out?
That's like learning to read or write. I mean, you have to plan in advance. Uh, and so, like, I mean, I started out with I want to grow potatoes and carrots. You know, So there was a time to plant them and there was a time to harvest them. And you can put that on a spreadsheet if you want, you know. And then I slowly added stuff. I grew onions and then I grew garlic, you know, and built up over time. Um, the people that I recommended have slightly different ways of approaching this, but they all just put it on a spreadsheet, what they want to do for the year. And you kind of follow it like a calendar. uh, and you only make a mistake once, and then it hurts so bad you never repeat it. You know.
Yeah, well, there's that. A couple of years ago, I had what for me was a large garden, and I'm just trying to think of its dimensions. Like maybe it was 50 by 50 or 25. Anyways, it was pretty big for my standards. And I got a frost months after, like at least a full no, at least a full month after I would have expected the last frost. And I thought it had just killed a whole bunch of stuff that I had. Now it started to come back, but it set me back. And that I was thinking, I don't know if I've got the personality for this. You know, my garden gets frosted and I'm just about done. Um, so yeah, when you talk about you only make a mistake once, that's what that makes me think of.
So it was. I had a personal challenge to get over the idea that everything I plant is going to grow.
Mm-hmm.
Right, even when you're down with it, you're always going to have losses. You know, and I always have backup. So I'm always throwing seedlings and young plants into the compost that are not needed. And all they did was give me a backup to a late frost or a failure of some description. And I personally find it easier to have my seeding area constantly brimming with options. And I don't mind chucking thousands of baby plants into the compost to be
Mm-hmm.
recycled because the seed cost me nothing. Well, next to relatively nothing, 10 euros for a pack, for a commercial pack, and that would last me years. And so it's irrelevant to a crop that's going to come out at 5 or 6 thousand. But maintaining everything growing, not having gaps that are out of cycle, is so critical that I always have tons of stuff on. I don't ever want to see a gap on my seeding table.
Hmm.
And that's how I manage that particular problem. Uh, and there's 100 little problems like this. None of it is rocket science, right? None of it is technical. You don't even need to learn a different language. I mean, you have to know what the Latin names for things are, but you're only ever doing that on forms and sheets. So I have to register with the government what I grow, and it has to go with the Latin name. And then on certain packaging, the Latin name has to go on it for regulation. But I don't remember any of that's all in a spreadsheet.
Right.
And anything I need, Wikipedia is there for, right? The rest of it is just like put a seed in soil and keep it wet and it grows. It's dead easy.
Well, I did have a specific question actually. I was working at the farm where I work earlier today, and I was asking, do you have any special any questions I should ask? And one was, do you have what we call the Colorado potato beetle?
Okay.
Because as people famous for their potatoes, I'm just because it can be a huge problem for our potatoes, and I'm just wondering, is that something you've ever dealt with? I can show you a picture, but it's a stripy beetle that likes potato plants.
Blight is our potato problem.
Okay, so that's more like a mold or something, is it?
It's a bacterial disease, and it can take over the whole country. And the problem is the most effective organic solution to it is to spray copper sulfate. But you have, which is perfectly safe and normal, it's in the ground anyway. But if you build it up too much, it's a problem. So you can't do it a lot.
Right.
And like I have areas of the farm that are old that have never been dug over that have a really good ecosystem in the soil, and they don't suffer as much. I mean, the blight is almost tolerable, as in if it gets it, I don't even need to do anything about it. It's not going to do that much damage. When I open new areas of land, right, or I move potatoes to an area like the lower area that's not as old, I find myself having to spray because the crop will be destroyed, right? And so I also like you can jettison a crop too. So if a blight warning comes up and I don't want to spray copper sulfate because I did it last year, right, I will have a plan in place for, and I will probably have stuff growing, getting ready to go in instead of it. Just get rid of it. Next, move on. And as long as you're continually moving, it shouldn't have, you'll lose a little bit of money, but really what you lose is time.
Right.
Uh,
Huh. Okay, that's interesting. Um, so I'm trying to think of how to make use of the rest of our time. I find it interesting just to get little glimpses into different parts of your operation. But is there any? You said that there are a lot of things like your backup seedlings, where it's a problem and then you've got a solution. Do you
yeah.
think it would? Like, is there a handful of those things you could just mention quickly that just? Again, I'm just trying to get a sort of an image of what it's like to do what you do.
So I have like wild sown areas that are a bit boggy and not great for, they wouldn't be great for crops anyway. And I grow, or I just let it grow after having thrown fistfuls of seeds in. Comfrey and nettles that I make a tea out of that I water with. Right? And when I say I make a tea out of it, I chop a load of it into a bucket and I fill it with water. And then next month, I take it out, water it into stuff, right? Dilute it a bit, water it. And then, I suppose, how is my day? Like, I get up in the morning and I do any paperwork that's necessary. And if there's no paperwork necessary, I try to meditate or lift some weights. And then I get the kids out to school and participate in that with my wife because it's a bit mad, that period. And then I go back to the farm and I deal with any deliveries for the day. So I do all the harvesting and the deliveries for the day. And then I have lunch, and then I don't always have lunch. Time doesn't allow it sometimes. And then I do the work after that of improvement of the farm, more things that I want to add, or if there's beds to turn over, or if there's stuff to move. I do that afterwards, and then I'll come home for dinner at 6 o'clock. But that's a family thing. We all eat together at 6 o'clock every day, no matter what's happening. But then I'll go back again until the light runs out. And so now it's bright outside now for me still.
Oh,
Uh,
wow.
yeah, yeah. And give it another 3 or 4 weeks, and it'll still be bright around 11:30. And I have lights I can put on in it, so and it doesn't bother me at all. In the sense that because I'm eating right, and I'm not drinking alcohol, and I'm not really smoking any weed or anything like that, and I'm eating high nutrition, clean food, and trying to keep my carbohydrates to early in the day. I'd never eat a bowl of pasta after 6 o'clock. Right? It'll just wreck me the next day. So I manage my energy levels through my food, you know, and then I don't really seem to need to sleep much. I'll go to bed at midnight and I'll be awake at 5 o'clock anyway. You know, and then I'm a glutton for pain, so the idea of being physically tired doesn't bother me. You know, like if I'm physically tired and I sit down and I don't want to get up and go back to work at 7 o'clock, like getting myself out the door with the van keys in my hand is all I have to do. And then the walk to the van, I just feel so fucking good about myself because I managed to do it, you know. And then when I get there, like I'll put on my music and I'll get into it and I'll get another 3 or 4 or 5 hours done. And the evening is when nothing else is happening for me. I'm not getting phone calls off people. The kids aren't there. My wife's not there. I'm just on my own. And I employ some people and they're not there as well either. And so it's a really zen place for me. And that I feel like it's like a therapy to me almost. I find myself in it and I get a lot of zen. I can get lost in something for an awful long time, like an hour of timelessness and just what's happening. And it's less about work then. That's why I say, like, I do 95 hours a week because I'm not working. In my head, I am on an absolute fucking mission. It's not work. I'm trying to build something beautiful. I'd love to eventually put about 20, 30 foot clay wall all the way around and make a walled garden, which changes it to a different climate. Funny enough, it creates a microclimate. And like that's incredibly ambitious. That'll actually cost millions to do. And therefore, like, I'm going to build it myself. And I don't really care if my kids have to tell my grandkids, there's that bit of the wall that my dad started. It's about aiming high and hoping I get at least halfway. And so like that's why sometimes when talking about farming, I'm not the right guy, because farming is just like a subsection of the larger thing of what I am doing. But like, and I do, but from your perspective, I do see it's very hard for people to make money out of it. It is very hard, but that's because what they want to do is be farmers. They're not they're not thinking about it in terms of, I want to make money out of this. Like, one of the things I have in my sights is to grow wasabi. It's like probably one of the most expensive things you can grow, and it's incredibly challenging. And to me, it would be like, if I can crack wasabi and get it to grow here and be able to show up with my little linen cloth and that's fucking amazing. Like, I mean, how much of a strut would you have on you walking back to the car after that?
Now,
And
I don't actually know what wasabi is. I know it's some kind of hot, like a spice or something, isn't it? But I don't really know. I just know it's hot. What is it?
it's like a tiny little palm tree about a foot tall. Right? It looks like a fat palm tree or like a skinny pineapple.
Okay.
And it grows in riverbeds in Japan. and it's one of the hardest things to get to grow outside of its original environment, and it's really, really spicy. So normal people like you and I probably would have had horseradish as a substitute for wasabi, but the real wasabi, mucho, mucho, you know. And that's what interests me. So I saw a little mini documentary about a guy in Nebraska in the tundra growing oranges and lemons without using electricity as a heating source. Oh, fucking, that to me is what is gets me excited to be able to do something like that, you know.
Right.
And like the idea of driving a tractor in a straight line and turning once every mile, it's like, oh, what a way to waste your life, unless you're like plugged in.
I was going to say you could listen to a lot of podcasts that way.
You know?
I've started to think about that as a career plan as well. You could always choose something which maybe it doesn't make a lot of money or it's not very inspiring, but you can use the time to do something else. You can learn languages and but yeah, it's not as interesting as what you're doing. Um, Let me just see if I have any other questions. Well, I guess what would be interesting too is what are some of the biggest problems you've had to overcome, farming wise?
The government pretending to help, but they're only interested in big ag, you know. And again, like if you ever get help from the government, it's because they want a photo next to a little farmer. It's not because they want to help. You know, like we're actually interfering with their plans and deals they've made with supermarkets and big companies. So yeah, you have to remember that the small business is actually the enemy of the government, really, in when you're competing against big business.
I meant
It's
more like
all personal challenges. It's all the difficult. Like if you can get yourself in the mindset to go out and get it, it doesn't matter whether it's farming or opening a bookshop, or it doesn't. Right? All of the challenges behind working for yourself and having a business are all in your own head. It's all the devices in your head. Those are the challenges. Like everything else is just learning. So I ended up with a load of wireworm in a plot, and then so I had to find the right nematode for the wireworm. It spoiled the crop a little bit. Had to take that as a financial hit, and you know, but like I have to leave space. There's a financial hit once a year from something, so the budget has to play out like that. But all of the challenges are really related to growing up as a person and being able to handle the pressure and being able to motivate yourself when there's nobody else telling you have to be at work at 9 o'clock. You know, like these are the real challenges that make people fail. You know, I've seen in the time that I've been doing it, I've seen 4 other businesses start in my area and in the same region. And I've gone down to them and helped them and shown them the part of the local market that's not facilitated, that I'm not interested in. Off you go. Right. And what fails is they can't resist going surfing for 4 days up the other side of the country. And they come back and something that should have been done in those 4 days didn't get done. And that's actually half the value of what they're doing. You know? Or they don't have the cojones to go into a restaurant and speak to them and be humble. You know, I am new to this. I've got some experience. I want to do my own thing. Is there anything that you would like to be available locally that isn't? Start writing all of this stuff down. You know, or do like a leaflet survey or something, or go knocking on doors, door to door, do 2,000 houses and ask them, is anybody interested in a box scheme? You know? And the idea of like, they're like, I want to be outside in the field growing food. I don't want to knock on doors doing surveys. It was like, well, you don't want it. You actually don't want it enough to do the hard bit
Mm-hmm.
that you don't want to do. And these are personal challenges. They're not, I mean, doing market research surveys, you learn that when you're like 14 in school.
Mm-hmm.
You know, none of it's complicated or difficult. Somebody else has already solved all of the main problems. You can buy a book, and if you can buy The Market Gardener or The Urban Gardener or Elliot Coleman's book, and you can just follow the guide, and you will grow great food. Any problem you have, you just look it up, and your biggest problem will be working out what the bug is called. Right? Somebody else has already fixed the problem. You know, all of the battles are internal, because working for yourself and driving yourself and motivating yourself is quite difficult. You know, like I'm sure it's easier for you to get on Zoom with me at the right time than it is for you to force yourself to do the editing when you don't feel like it.
Yes. I
It's the
never feel
personal,
like the editing.
right? And that's what it's about, you know. And whatever anybody chooses to do, like it has to be about themselves. It has to be about them wanting it, like what it means is a reflection to them. You know, for me, it's the opportunity to like. I have a real problem with authority, and I can't work for other people. It's never worked out, so I kind of have to work for myself, right? But the challenge in all of that actually doesn't matter what I do.
Right.
It's almost like the same personal challenges exist. You know, so to me, to force myself to sit down and do my taxes, which takes about 3 days, even though I've got an accountant helping me, right? That to me is harder than going out in the wind and the rain and digging holes to put up fencing. You know,
Mm-hmm.
uh, and
Oh,
if
I
you
always.
ask me,
I think physical work is always easier than like mental, especially if it's something like taxes, where there's always some pain in trying to figure out how you're supposed to do something and track down something you recorded or didn't record, or yeah. Um,
so like it's all about how you approach the particular problem of making yourself do things you don't want to do so that you can get what you want. You know,
mhm.
like I want that walled garden so bad, you know, and it's going to cost so much money, even in the materials. Whether I make the materials myself or I buy them is irrelevant, you know, in the actual cost that goes into it. And like the people that get that are the people that wanted enough to do the shitty hard work that makes it happen. You know? Everybody else, it was it'd be nice. It would be nice, you know. That would be lovely if I had it, you
Yeah,
know.
yeah.
And the people that get it are just insanely obsessed about getting
One thing I'm wondering is, would it be possible and not too much trouble to send me some pictures of your farm? If you want, I can cut them into the video.
it.
Anytime. I mean, like now in a week, whenever. I won't have this up for a little bit, so.
Yeah, I can. I try to keep my personal like as separate from the farm, um, because I only service locally, so there's no benefit to advertising like on a wide scale. But I
Right.
can send you some stuff, pictures of the farm, and show you what I mean and show you what it looks like.
Yeah, I'm just either so that, well, while we're talking, it might make more sense to people, but also just to give a sense of any particular things that you were particularly pleased with how they turned out, or I don't know. I really just something to make it more real. I'm gradually getting more
Yeah,
into the
yeah,
editing,
yeah, no
so I can.
problem.
Um, I'm wondering actually if you could give me, if it's not too much of a pain, just an overview of what a year is like for you.
Yeah, well, that was the one bit that I didn't actually say earlier on, was that the one of the biggest parts that of it for my own personal uh, well-being is living seasonally. I didn't realize how valuable it was to have a very extreme difference between the winter and the summer and how I live my life. You know, So I stopped working the week before Christmas, and then I just dive into family life and give my wife a bit of a break, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and I try not to do anything in January. I try not to.
I
And
was
if
going
I
to say, I have
do,
a feeling that if you're like this during the farming season, it's going to be hard to just not do anything other times.
well, try to do stuff in the house. So I service the cars and I fix anything that needs fixing. And my wife normally has a list of shit ready for me, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because idle hands, I can get up to trouble too, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Like when everything closed for coronavirus, I got into brewing beer and I got really fat.
Well, from what I hear, other people got into baking bread and got fat. So,
Yeah, my wife was getting into cakes and buns and banana bread and shit at the same time, and I didn't quite have. It affected me more than I realized, and I didn't realize until like this year, and things started to get really back to some way normal. Right, how badly affected I had been by it, and how difficult it was to get myself back on track
mm-hmm.
with where I was before all of that happened. You know? It was all to do with like all the 5-year plan and the 10-year plan got thrown out the window because of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then like anything beyond a month was a haze, and that's a nightmare when it takes you 6 months to grow
Right, right,
something.
and this is, I imagine, because you grow for businesses, so the business, it doesn't matter that you can keep farming, but the businesses don't have any customers.
Yeah, there's no restaurants, no hotels. That fucking sucks, you know.
Um,
uh
so you don't have any or many like grocery stores or markets or anything like that. It's all okay. Yeah.
it as I say, well, um I wouldn't recommend starting there, you know. If you wanted to starting out targeting restaurants, like you won't be able to compete on price with distributors, so you have to compete on quality,
Mm-hmm.
and you then have to have like the media package for branding. I can send you that, actually. I can send you my media package,
That would be interesting.
um, which is collections of photographs of products and then a little video of the farm, with an emphasis on showing that I'm doing it on a small scale with hand tools, right?
Mm-hmm.
And even in the video, it makes it look, there's only half of it. What's behind in the video is the rest of it, which is a little bit more industrial looking.
Right.
um, but like, yeah, I would recommend trying to start with a box scheme, because you can put wonky veg into a box scheme.
Mm-hmm.
You know, things don't have to look right. You know?
Well, yeah, that's an interesting thing I've ran into, which is where I really think if people are buying your produce because they value how it was made, then if anything, they should to some degree appreciate if it's a little bit off, because that's how you know it's the real thing, right? Um, but it's still hard. Like one thing I've found that happens, I've noticed this with the farmer I work for, and also when my family tried it more, is that you end up eating a lot of the weird stuff yourself, and then giving the good stuff, the best goes for sale. And so here I was growing this, and now I end up eating all the weird stuff. But um, yeah.
Well, like, it doesn't taste any different, you know, but you can't expect people to know that, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and in the relationship with people, they can't feel, if they feel like you're, we would say, taking the piss. So um, if they would feel like you think they're a fool and therefore you're giving them the shit food,
Right.
right? It's a really bad feeling that people can get.
Mm-hmm.
And all it takes is like some weird looking vegetables that you're trying to tell them are fine, but they've never seen it look like that, and they don't know anything about growing food or vegetables.
Mm-hmm.
So it creates a suspicion in their mind, right?
Mm-hmm.
People that grow their own food in their back garden or whatever, and they're buying extra off you, they will know, and they won't care, right? They will actually, you know, some people like the carrots that turn out like aliens,
Yeah,
and they
aliens. They
think
look
it's
like
funny.
two people up to something, or yeah.
Yeah. And like I take them home and I'll cook them whole, and the kids think it's
Yeah,
hilarious, and so there's a bit of that, right? But it's more forgiving in residential when you're dealing one-to-one
right,
with people,
right.
right? Like there's no money in like chefs that are just cranking out numbers, right? So there's no point in dealing with them because they will go to a discount store to buy it.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have to compete on price for them, and you can't because uh, and so then that leaves you with the high-end chefs, and like you have to be on your game. It has to be excellent, and you have to walk in there 100% confident they can't get any better. Uh, that's where you kind of progress to, doing a box scheme is actually one of the easiest ways to start, but you need the customers for it. You need at least 25, 30 people, households that are going to take one every week, and you have to be able to produce for about 40 weeks of the year. And you can roughly calculate that if you charge them, I don't know, in Canadian dollars, it probably be what, $40 a week. So over 40 weeks, you can put that down at 1,600 a year. And so for 20 people, you've got 32 grand. And it might cost you about 4,000 to do it. So there you've got 28 grand. And one person on their own with small income can probably do that on about 30 hours a week on their own. If you had a girlfriend or a partner working with you, you could probably do 70 people, 70 households. And then you're talking, can't do the maths on that one. More, a lot more.
Double.
Great money.
Yeah.
Enough to raise a family on. And you probably do it together. Like if your partner has children, like you'll do it on your own, maybe get a mate in, maybe hire someone, and then as your partner is able to do 10 or 15 hours a week, once they get to that point, then you'll be kind of back on track again. Or you can cheat a little bit and get one of those little 2-wheel tractors or a BCS or something just to get extra hours out of it for you, right? I handled having very young children by working like a maniac so that I didn't have to be at home.
I've heard that strategy before.
And I have a top woman as a wife. She just wanted me out of the way.
Yeah, good deal.
And like, yes, I my contribution was like sanitizing and cleaning the house to hospital standards once a week so that she feels comfortable, and doing the shopping and stuff, doing the outside stuff, and just letting her get on with it. Other than that, I just stayed out of the way, for all 5 of them. But like, and you see, this is where it kind of facilitates something, and it's like, I don't know what your status is, but like if you're on a personal mission like that and you're doing something with soul and you have principles behind what you're doing and what you're willing to accept and what you're not willing to accept and what you're doing, and you have a long-term vision, like you will attract somebody to that. You will attract a partner to that. Right? The values that highly because you have it on display the whole time. Right? Fine. And so it's a highly valuable asset when it comes to establishing the type of character that you are on display. And if it's something that you do feel like, the person that's attracted to that will be the type of person that you will want to partner with. Right. And it's the perfect environment to have a family in, because your family doesn't have to be separate from it. You can put a playhouse in and a sand pit for the kids, and you can get that, and when they're old enough to be involved in what you're doing, they'll bounce off you and come and help.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like it's an all-in-one solution because you're working for yourself, you're dictating it yourself. It's got a set of values and principles behind it that you can be proud of. If you want to go down the regenerative route or whatever angle that you want to take on the actual growing side of it. And uh, that's when it makes it easier to go into businesses and restaurants and deal with them, when you can be proud of how you're doing something and you're not feeling guilty that you're cheating.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
you know uh, and like I talk about restaurants and hotels, but there is actually bakers and food producers that sell food that's already done to restaurants and hotels. you know um, there's a whole food industry in the background that is not direct to the consumer, that there's a one step away,
Mm-hmm.
and they're all interested in better quality ingredients, especially in the upper end of it. you know uh, you asked me what is my year like.
Yes.
uh, I've been trying to think of it and come back to it.
Oh.
I got to January, right? February, I give myself until Valentine's Day to have my plan sorted,
Mm-hmm.
right? And there might be some stuff to do physically on the farm at that point in order to prepare for whatever plan I've got. And then from Valentine's to St. Patrick's Day, which is the 17th of
Yes. Yes.
March. So it's a month there where I'm seeding and planting, right? So it's not very physical, but it's time intensive. It's repetitive, time intensive tasks. A lot of labeling and kind of trying to be organized. And then after that, I'm watching the weather for frost dates and things like that, and I'm trying to plant accordingly. And I have to adjust my spreadsheet as I'm going as to when I actually planted things as opposed to when I wanted to plant things. You know? And there's this kind of incline that happens up to the middle of May. So over 2 months, where it's trying to get everything in the ground at the right time. Right. And I grow broccoli over the winter in my tunnels. And so I have to replace that with the tomatoes and the cucumbers and the summer crops that grow in polytunnels.
Right.
And so that's a really highly intense period. And that kind of gets me warmed up for the season. And then from around, it's already started, but around now, um, I'm delivering every day. So I'm at the farm as early as I can get there. I do yesterday's orders and I harvest them and I deliver them. And that it stays in that pattern of dealing with the orders, harvest, delivery, and then dealing with whatever other work needs to be done afterwards. So whether that's tidying up from the harvest right the way through to replanting stuff and reseeding things. And then around Halloween, that kind of stops. And I'll have a lot of storage product like okra and onions and garlic and potatoes in storage that I'll still be selling. And that's when I start to ease off time wise and start to spend more time at home. Um, and then that's a kind of a wind down to the last week of Christmas. I aim to have everything in place for the winter. So I'll grow a cover crop over winter, or I'll cover things in a tarp so that I don't have a lot of weeds growing in it, and I can just peel the tarp back and carry on in the spring.
Right. Right. Yeah.
And then, yeah, it fades down, and then I stop at Christmas and get back into the family life.
Hmm.
And it's funny because, like, it hasn't quite started yet, but I'd say give it another 4 weeks, and everybody thinks I'm never at home and I never see my children, and nothing ever happens from my end, and all I ever do is work. And then by the time I kick off again in February, the people around me think I never work and I'm a lazy bum. Because they're not on a yearly cycle. I'm on a yearly
Yeah.
cycle.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting that you mentioned it being beneficial to be on a yearly cycle because I've thought about that a fair bit the last few years, and I like the idea of having periods of really working intensely, and then periods where you're not doing that as much, but but not but not not often. Like I don't know if the idea of extensive recreation and weekends is necessarily a great idea. Like I could see. I mean, you do it if you have to, but I wonder whether, at least for me, I've overvalued the idea of recreation. And actually, working most of the time, if it's work you can stand, is actually the way to go.
I mean, what is recreation? Only trying to occupy yourself with something stimulating, you know?
Well, that's a good point. In fact, the word I meant was entertainment, which is even worse. Because yeah, it's like just passively taking stuff in.
Like, for me, like, it's about people more than activities. So I like surfing, right, which is a solo activity,
Mhm.
and I don't do it very much, but it's as much about the beach gathering afterwards than it is about being in the water.
Mhm.
Um, and like, I'm always talking to people. So like before I came on with you and I was at work, I had spent 2 hours on the phone with a friend, but while I was working, you know, in there, and like my recreation or my entertainment, like the things I do outside work, um, are all about people. It's all about the connection with people and how, and there is a selfish element to that in the sense that it's all about how I feel. It's about the feelings that I get, you know. So sitting down with a friend on a Saturday night in the winter and smoking a joint and finding out about their year and like really connecting at an emotional level when everybody gets a little bit gone and the defenses drop and the inhibitions drop and we start talking about fears and self-esteem and plans and the deeper part of the human connection with the people that I would call my brotherhood. That to me, like, you know, like my wife thinks I'm going off smoking weed. I'm not. I'm building. I am connecting with another human. Is what
Mhm.
I'm really doing. And like, I mean, I'll watch a movie, or like I go to the cinema every maybe once a month or whatever, and and like, I'm not watching the movie. I'm sitting there with my kids or my wife or my friends, or
Mhm.
in my world, in my head, that's what I'm doing. Like, it's the activity is irrelevant. You know?
Mhm.
And this idea that one must be entertained in a no work kind of mode. So I will not do anything productive, and therefore I am resting.
Yeah.
Stupid. I don't get it. I don't understand it. I don't understand it. And I would discourage others from it. Like taking it, like having a day off or whatever, and thinking that you must not do anything that can be considered work, otherwise it's not a day off, right?
Yeah.
Or that, you have to get drunk, or that you have to go to the party, or you have to go out on a Saturday night because otherwise you haven't had a weekend.
Mhm.
It was like, it doesn't make any sense to me. Like, I mean, even if I'm on my own, right? It was like, I just can't bring myself to do it. I mean, I used to play computer games and stuff like that and whatever, and it served its purpose. But I think I've read too much philosophy and I've spoke to too many people, and now I just like, I don't get anything from it. If anything, I feel guilty.
Yeah.
I feel like I've wasted my time. And genuinely, if I had absolutely nothing to do whatsoever, I'd probably pick up my guitar and try to play a scale, or and I would feel better from that, because you're creating the Zen, you're creating the state, flow state, which you would have if you were perfectly relaxed and into a movie or into the game you were playing and you weren't thinking about your life. But then, you're actually doing something, you're getting better at something, you're kind of improving yourself ever so slightly. Or if you're with somebody, you're experiencing a connection between consciousnesses. Like,
Mhm.
it's so hard to know what other people are thinking and really connect to them. It takes time, and once you can sit and settle and connect and zone in with the person that you're with and lose the thoughts of everything else that's happening outside of it, like picture an electric arc from brain to brain or heart to heart. It's like that is just so much better than entertaining yourself, you know?
Yeah, I'm just, well, I've tried this before, I guess, but again, I'm committing to trying to basically eliminate or really, really reduce any kind of entertainment just to zero, and just if I'm going to be doing something sort of recreational, make sure it's still productive in some way, even if, like you say, it's musical. Like it's not quite clear what I'm producing, but it's at least something that will get you further in something than you were before, and that's
Like I had a young fella who was having difficulty with the idea, and I challenged him to a half step, right? Uh, like I wasn't telling him he should do it. I was just telling him, try it. It might work. It might help, and it might feel better. And what I suggested to him was to put on music either in headphones or good speakers, like not on your stupid shitty phone speaker,
yeah.
right? Headphones if you have to. If you've got decent speakers, great, right? But lie on the floor and either put on an eye mask or turn off the lights or close your eyes or whatever. And but lie on the floor like a hard surface, right? So your body posture is actually flat, which is uncomfortable because we always have soft furnishings or whatever,
Mhm.
right? But just try to listen and feel the music. If you listen to stuff you like, or but really try to hear the music and what they're saying. And like, I mean, the words of a song have a meaning, but the music has a meaning. It's supposed to take you somewhere. It's supposed to feel a certain way. It's supposed to invoke something in you, which is what they're trying to communicate. So lie on the floor in the dark or with your eyes closed and actually listen to a full album of music that somebody's put together, because that's curated properly,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
you know. And then you have heard the music, and then it will sound different to you when you're listening to it driving, right? And then you're not doing anything, you're not working, you're in a pure relaxation state. You're actually straightening your posture because you're lying on the ground. You've given yourself some form of physical discomfort because lying on the hard floor isn't that comfortable. But it's giving you something to zen away from, right? So when you enter the flow state and you really listen to the music, you don't feel that you're on the floor anymore, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then when you snap out of it, you realize that you were in that state, and that state is achievable by relaxing into it.
Mm-hmm.
And like, what are you going to do? Watch Game of Thrones? What's that going to fucking do for you? You know? And don't get me wrong, I've seen Game of Thrones. I've watched all of it. I thought it was interesting. But I found it more interesting to talk to other people about the difference between what they saw and what I saw than the experience of watching the the TV series.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Is that sound like nonsense? Maybe it does.
Not entirely. I mean, I'm at a point where I find it very hard to find any kind of movie or anything that really appeals to me, um, and so I can certainly understand not finding it very interesting. Whether I've never been that interested in talking to people about movies or stories myself. I've never had anything I wanted to talk about the things. I just experience it and then it's gone. Um,
Okay.
but yeah, I don't find movies I won't say that engaging. I can get into them, but yeah. Just the other night I started one and then I just gave up halfway through. It wasn't doing it for me. Um,
That
um,
to me is a sign of incredible personal development. You know.
to give up, or just poor choice in the first place that I chose something.
That you don't find it entertaining. I mean,
Yeah.
there's only like 12 stories anyway, you know?
Well, and I don't think they're even doing them anymore. I think they're making stuff where it's not anything. Like
Yeah,
it's
they've boiled it down to three in a political motive. Yeah.
yeah, something like that. Yeah, I don't know. I think the lack of inspiration is a big deal. I think. Um,
But that to me is really a great sign of progress in somebody's personal development, that they're no longer entertained by that which is put out to numb the masses, you know.
Maybe the thing is too. I don't want to get into it a lot, but I grew up. I was homeschooled, and I've generally kind of grown up off under a rock. So I just feel alien to a lot of mainstream stuff. And so a lot of movies and stuff, and especially when I was a kid, I up to the age of 12 or 14 or maybe even 18, I could watch stuff and enjoy it. But increasingly it just they but they don't do things that would appeal to me. They could, but they don't.
um I fight myself. Sometimes I could express that in terms of time, as if time is running out and how short one's life is, right? But that's a bit of a uh, post hoc rationale, because that's not really what I'm thinking about when I'm doing it. I don't think about trying to squeeze every minute out of every day. You know, it's really not what I'm thinking about at the time. You know. And I am very kind of emotionally impulsive in that, like, I want to do what I'm doing. It's not like I'm making myself do it, you know?
Mhm.
If that makes sense. Like, not anymore, at least. You know, at one point I was quite dedicated to changing myself and developing new habits. But being in these new habits now, like, is how to describe it. It feels like a normal, but it's not like I feel like I was wasting my time
Mhm.
before I got here either. You know, I don't punish myself thinking, you know, I wish I did this beforehand or
Well, it
anything.
sounds like you facilitated your transformation into a new person, and you don't regret being the previous person, but now you're a different one. Like you,
Absolutely. I mean, still to every day I rely on, um, internally, on the good parts of like the old person, you know.
hmm
Or the other person, you know, in my own transformation. I wouldn't regret it for a start, you know. And the older I get, the less negative feelings I have towards the things that I would have liked to have been different when I was a child, you know.
hmm
Or you could say I had a rough upbringing. I would say that I had an upbringing that was highly suitable for staying where I was and not changing.
hmm
And then because I wanted something different and I wanted to change where I was living and how I was living and what I wanted to do, I needed to change myself to fit the people of the environment that I wanted to be in. You know, I was perfectly well adapted to be growing up where I was growing up. You know, I just didn't want it and wanted
hmm
to move, so I had to change myself to make that move. And I think in the process of trying to change oneself, uh, I discovered then that we're a lot more flexible and we have a lot more choice than we realize, you know. Uh, and so there was where I was, and then there was where I wanted to be, but the gulf in the middle was definitely not a straight line. It was branch after branch after branch, you know, and choice after choice after choice, and you know, and everything always looks different when you look back at it to when you imagine it in the future as to what it feels like in the moment of the experience, you know. And it wasn't very planned. Like, I say that I changed myself, but it's not like I didn't think that I was even changing myself when I was doing it. This is all what I call it now afterwards. You know, it's not like I had this giant epiphany or anything and wanted to make this move. I was just not happy and kind of got prompted to do something about it and thought, I want to work outside. Who works outside? Farmers work outside. Very low entry point, you know. You know, it's like if you want to be an engineer that works on windmills, quite a high entry point. You know, if you want to grow food, like, put some seeds in the ground and find somebody to sell it to. You know.
Well, We are now at the 2 hour mark. Um, uh, do you want to wrap up? Or
Yeah, I'm slowing down a bit
yeah,
now. Yeah, I
yeah.
can feel the
I
tiredness.
would be interested sometime, if you're interested, to either talk more about your past, because I know from Artemis there's some interesting things in how you got to be where you are, and I'm tempted like to do a 5 hour extravaganza, but I don't think during this time of year probably. But anyways, I'd be certainly
Yeah.
interested in talking to you more in the future. Um, I again, I don't know if this was interesting to my viewers, but I certainly found it interesting, just kind of meandering through various subjects related to farming and that way of life. So,
You got me talking about my favorite stuff, so I'm always up for that.
well, that's great. I'm happy to talk, and maybe in the future we can talk more.
Cool.
Okay.
Great to meet you in person, Julian. Or
Yes. Yes.
kind of.
I'm glad we've had a great connection to the hardly any lag or anything. This has been good. So, thanks a lot, and talk to you later.
Peace out.